Hello, everyone, to today's webinar about DAOs and DeFi. We have today again 4 wonderful guests with Michael Svoboda, Oliver Ricken, Hovo, and Niels. We will be discussing various aspects of DAOs, what were like the differences between existing governance structures and DAOs, and how will DAOs affect like the blockchain ecosystem and also DeFi. I'm very happy that I have today here these 4 wonderful guests, and I would suggest that maybe we could start with a little introduction round so that you could quickly introduce yourself and also the project or the company you're working for. Oliver, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Oliver Ricken. Been active in the blockchain space for years already. So one of the early adopters over here in the Netherlands. I am from the Amsterdam area. Together with Richard and Jeroen, I run Ledger Leopard, which is the biggest blockchain solution building company in the Netherlands and possibly even the Benelux, working with more than 70 people full-time on blockchain solutions. And besides my work at Ledger Leopard, I'm also affiliated to the Technical University of Delft, where I pursue my PhD on the governance of decentralized autonomous organizations. Somewhere at 3/4 of my PhD right now, but apparently you're always at 3/4 of your PhD, but did a lot of research towards DAOs for years already now. Literally analyzed over 4,500 of them in detail of their governance structures and how decentralized they are, etc. So really deep diving into DAOs for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Thanks to have you here. Then I would say next is Niels.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Niels, or Niels, how they call me within Fiat DAO. I'm a contributor at Fiat DAO. We are a lending protocol. We accept illiquid locked tokens and allow you to borrow against so we are a DeFi project. We are still pretty young, just about to launch this or next week. And yeah, we went like DAO first, so like we know all about building up an organizational structure that's decentralized.
Great, Niels. The next I would say is Michael.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Svoboda. I'm COO of the Liquidity protocol. Liquidity is an interest-free borrowing protocol on Ethereum. What does it mean concretely? So if you're a student of the Frankfurt Business School, you don't need to sell your ETH. You can come to Liquidity, deposit it there, and take out a loan to pay for your tuition. Liquidity has been around since April last year, had more than 2 billion in TVL and 24 million in revenue. So established protocol. And I'm kind of the devil's advocate here because Liquidity doesn't have a DAO.
Great to have you here, Michael. And I'm very curious to hear more about how you set everything up and what's like the purpose of it. Then last we have Hovo.
Guys, I'm Hovo. I'm a contributor for Exodia. And so where we are trying to rebuild a reserve currency that is backed by other currencies, cryptocurrencies. Yeah, and so we're trying to create a DAO around that to kind of replace the more centralized or, like the USD, for example, where you get like not one person, you've got many people that decide, but now we're trying to kind of have a DAO that replaces the process of making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome to have you guys all here today for the webinar. Oliver, like a true expert with his research expertise, and then also 3 people with like hands-on experience in DeFi and DAOs. I would right away dive into the first question. This is for you, Oliver. Like, if you would have to describe it, like, what is a DAO? And what distinguishes a DAO from like traditional governance structures, let's say, for example, from companies or foundations?
It is definitely the most hard question to come up with to begin with, because what is a DAO is very vague in a lot of cases. A lot of people have tried to come up with a definition of what a DAO is, and based on empirical research going over thousands of DAOs myself, and also looking into all different kind of definitions that you saw in the market and in literature already, we came up with a definition ourselves for what a DAO is. And basically, and I'm going to read it out loud. A DAO is a system in which storage and transaction of value and notary, between brackets, voting functions can be designed, organized, recorded, and archived, and where data and actions are recorded and autonomously executed in a decentralized way, which is an absolutely very technical term of what a DAO is. In practice, it is a way for people to cooperate, where you can manage mutual funds that you hold on to, and basically organize votings and track votings, and also execute the outcome of voting, especially with regards to transfer of value in the form of a cryptocurrency whatsoever. Going into the details of DAOs in themselves, the word decentralized is very deceiving, and the word autonomous is very deceiving if I see the projects out there, because I would say that a vast majority of DAOs is not really decentralized, and a vast majority of DAOs is not really autonomous, but they call themselves DAOs anyhow. So a lot of projects call themselves a DAO to basically say, hey, we don't have the traditional hierarchical structure, we do it together, basically. In practice, we do see hierarchical structures quite a lot with people who have single majority votes, etc. But it could be a new way of organizing ourselves, and especially making these types of very flat-based and more democratic organizations, making it very easy to set it up. So I do see a very nice future for DAOs, but we do have to be considerate of how decentralized they are, how autonomous they are, and what they really can be used for. So that is basically, in a very hard way, describing what a DAO is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Oliver. Yeah, this was already, you're right, this was a very technical definition, but I think you pretty much put it on point, because DAOs can be like a lot of different things, I would say, also in regard like the use case that they basically serve. I mean, we saw in the United States that they were trying to purchase this certificate, or like, I'm not saying the wrong word, but like this...
the Constitution DAO you refer to. Yeah.
Correct, Constitution DAO, yeah. And this was also already something where I find it super exciting that basically people get together, form like such kind of a DAO, and then basically find a purpose and organize via such kind of institution. Then right away, the next question goes to Niels and to Hovo, because Fiat DAO and Exodia are both still quite young DeFi protocols. And there's like the idea that especially in the early stage of DeFi protocols, it can be also a disadvantage to be a DAO, because basically organizing all the different members, all the different opinions can be costly, like let's say governance costs. And I'm curious on how did you guys like basically tackle this issue, whether you already use some form of on-chain voting or snapshots, or like how is the current state basically in your project? Niels, do you want to start first?
Sure, and can I start with offering an alternative definition for the DAO, which is very much in line with what Olivier has said before, but it's maybe because we're the hands-on guys here, so it's maybe something more hands-on. So when I think of it, I think of a bunch of people having like a shared vision, a shared idea, a shared mission that they want to realize, and they come together over the internet, and they have a shared treasury that they manage jointly, and in order to pursue that goal, that mission, the vision that they have. And I think that that shared mission, that shared vision is one of like the key points here, no DAO, no community around the DAO would work properly if there wasn't like a shared mission or vision. So I think that's one of the key goals or aspects of a DAO, apart from the technical aspects that Olivier has lined out before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what I think of when I think of a DAO, and that's also actually how how it started at Fiat DAO, right? So a bunch of people, some of them have known each other before from working together on other projects maybe, but most of them, and initially it was like a small group of people, but haven't actually known each other, right? The only means they had like previously to be in touch is like the internet and whatever communication channels that we have. So like but sharing that vision of the protocol that we're building, we came together and built Fiat DAO from the very beginning. So there was never something like a legal entity or so that has developed the first ideas around that. It was always just a bunch of people who put together some money, raised some money into a shared treasury. That's all managed over the internet in a decentralized manner. So like the first form in terms of technical tools used of that DAO probably was just a multisig. So you have a multisig. No single signer can design on how those funds are used, but you have to kind of come together on a decision. And so that's how that DAO has formed, right? So a means to actually collect some money to develop your idea, and communication over the internet, of course. And then you start working on that idea. You start growing the community around that idea. And then this DAO actually is like an evolving structure, right? It's not like you define it initially and then it's there and that's how it works, but it actually evolves into whatever it may become in the months or years ahead, right? So
if I may add
sure.
to that, Niels, I think you struck an excellent point there. It's impossible to design your DAO completely from scratch. It's a living organism, and that also goes, for example, for the best fit of the governance mechanism you want to use for your DAO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe in the beginning you want to have a highly centralized group making the quick decisions to get things started, and then open it up more to a broader community and have a more democratic system later on, and maybe have subsystems, etc. Fractali DAO just published their white paper with ideas that you can have separate different governance mechanisms in different groups, etc., which could be a very interesting idea. But it should be a organic element in this. And also with regards to DAOs and governance of DAOs, I think the most important rule is that you build in mechanisms to be able to always change the rules with each other, because the world is going to change all the time. So excellent point there, Niels.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
I'll jump into it also and follow up on the question, kind of for you to, what were the biggest kind of advantages you had now starting with the DAO, and what also the drawbacks from your experience to bootstrap?
My personal experience now, I definitely one thing. I mean, and I've built startups before too, right? So I know what it means to build a startup in terms of like a legal structure, and work from this structure, or doing the DAO thing, right? And I think one of the things that was very appealing to us is just this focus that we can put on actually building out, like shaping the idea, the vision, and building out the idea and the vision, given that we are just a bunch of people who sit somewhere on this planet, right? And we don't actually know where everyone is sitting, and don't even know anyone. We also don't needed to know everyone in terms of let's say their identity, which are all things that you'd have to know if you wanted to actually build a legal entity, right? because then you would want these people to actually have a certain amount of equity in the company. That's all like a legal process that you had to go through. You have to reveal, you know, like your identity and everything, which are all things that are not necessarily important for developing the idea, right? So we could from like day one focus on actually building out the idea, building out the, you know, a community around it without having to think about, you know, setting up a legal structure. Where should that be? Because, you know, some guy lives there, the other guy lives somewhere else. What's the best, you know, jurisdiction to actually create that company in? So I think from, let's say from the initial phase on, it's definitely the aspect of work, like, you know, working efficiently on that idea, given the structure and given the setting with all those people in all those different places on the world. And I think going forward, there are additional benefits to it. And what we are always trying to do in this space, like crypto, right? It's always about building resilient systems, right? And that means, you know, for instance, no single point of failure and stuff like that. If we would be using a legal entity that sits in some jurisdiction, we're already prone to whatever, you know, direction that jurisdiction may take at some point with regards to how open, you know, and they are towards the crypto industry, for instance. So that's just like one example. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. Actually, this is actually like a really good point, because what I also see very often about DAOs is that they are very accessible. So that basically it's easy to become part of one, which is, I think, also like a difference compared to, let's say, for example, to a company where you should usually apply and you have some formal contract. But for DAOs, it's I would say like the burden is very, very low. So you can just go, for example, on Discord and communicate. However, we just got in also a very nice question from Andreas, which would be directed at Michael, because Liquidity certainly has chosen like a different path. They are a registered company in Switzerland. And with that, they basically go like in a different direction. And Andreas is asking, what is the benefit of a DAO over a traditional organization? And I would now flip basically the question, Michael, what is basically the idea or the advantage of you guys really like registering the company and operating it in this way?
Sure, I can outline why we don't have a DAO. And I said I play the devil's advocate. It's not that I don't think DAOs are great. I think this is a great use case of the blockchain. For me, these are borderless organizations for the internet age. So I'm very fascinated about that. But at Liquidity, why didn't we choose a DAO? Actually, it's quite simple and straightforward. The Liquidity protocol is totally immutable. It's deployed. You can't change anything. You can't govern anything. So just for the product itself, there isn't much you can govern in that way. Of course, we have a community, we have that on Discord, we see how we can grow the ecosystem, but it's not that we would need for that a DAO. What it could be, if you have another product and you want to adapt things, you want to update things, that it makes a lot of sense. It's just kind of, we are fascinated by this, you have this vending machine out there, and the Liquidity AG doesn't have more control right now over the system than any user. It doesn't have more information. So we have the company. We had the company to raise funds. So that's sometimes also a reason why to create the DAO, because it's much faster. We did it the traditional way. We developed and deployed it. And that's kind of the legal wrapper for our company. And there, of course, it has a bit the advantage for that part that for the legal liabilities and other stuff. At the beginning, it's complicated, but also then kind of you have a structure how it works. So that's also something that with DAOs, I think you shouldn't do it to just avoid legal and tax question. Maybe they will come then later on.
Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, what I'm also always thinking is like DeFi right now is mostly steered by retail investors, and I think the next step would be really, I mean, we're seeing that already right now, Aave and others, like they're all like basically aiming also for the institutional investors. Michael, would you say that this would be something where something like Liquidity will have an advantage, maybe over like traditional DAOs, which maybe yeah, I don't know, like maybe a bit more vague, also like different, like, you know what I mean? Like that basically like companies would feel not so comfortable, for example, just using like some DAOs and prefer something like Liquidity.
Sure, they're different investors. And I mean, we started early in 2019 and it wasn't that a thing. That's why kind of it happened that way. Nevertheless, I mean, what I've seen in crypto and DeFi and these native investors, it works amazingly well. I mean, I've seen like Fiat DAO raised money, how fast it was, how uncomplicated, as Neil said, how they were able to focus on the product. I think that's a really interesting way to do that. Yeah.
Now back to Hovo, because Niels made before like a really interesting point. This is also how I joined Exodia, because back then I was really interested in Fantom, and I also very much like the concept of Olympus DAO. And Exodia is a fork on Fantom, focusing on building the treasury. So that was like a really good point from you, Niels. And maybe Hovo, you can maybe also a bit explain, like, I think we don't have on-chain voting yet, but we have alternative voting, right? Like snapshots. And maybe you could explain a little bit on what you experienced so far by running the protocol.
Yeah. So I think like the Oliver's definition of a DAO is kind of what we strive for, what we want to reach, but I don't think it's a good idea to try to implement it straight away, because when you kind of go for that kind of structure, it's harder to make decisions and it's longer also. And when you're kind of trying to start something, you kind of need some agility and some liberty in the decision and what we can make. So we're still trying to kind of have a decentralized process of making decisions, but we're not, following every rule and really being like decentralized and autonomous. So right now we kind of have we're really based on community. So we've got, I'd say, like an insider group of maybe like 10 people, where we are trading ideas and really trying to come up with good ideas and what to do. And then there's a kind of a larger group of insiders, where I'd say it's kind of the second layer, where it's the larger community with maybe 20-30 members, and it's basically the people who showed interest and tried to take part and improve and contribute to the DAO. And then there's the third layer, I'd say, which is the really the whole community. And so we're kind of going from one layer and then bringing that idea to the second layer, and then in turn we're kind of to everyone on a snapshot voting. And this is kind of the best way for now. Eventually we really want to go on chain, because I think in a DAO there is decentralized and autonomous, and the blockchain really is there to make us autonomous and decentralized. So yeah, this is kind of currently our setup, and we've got the multi-signer wallet also to avoid any single point of failure.
Yeah, I have to agree with this Hovo, because this was also how basically I got involved with Exodia. It was not basically that I was like, hey, it's not exactly this project, but like the community, like the DAO was very welcoming, and it was possible to, over like a period of time, to basically get more involved. And then I really felt like, hey, this is something where we can do something together. And there was really like this community feeling, and that really was like this one thing that was making me interested in Exodia back then and also today. And yeah, I really think that so far it has been like a lot of fun with you, Hovo. And yeah, so until now, really, really great work. There we can already go. Yeah.
Can I add a thought there, and something that might be interesting to ask ourselves is, because building communities around a product or something is something that you could also do in a from a legal entity outwards, like let's say, I don't know, Ford, the automaker, could just like build a community around creating Ford and stuff, right? So it's nothing that necessarily only exists DAOs, right? So the question is, and I would just make that statement here that I think it works better with DAOs, community building, and not that I have like data that backs me up there, but that's just like my intuitive feeling. Seeing how, just as you explained before, how you did that, and Christian, right? Like how you got involved in a DAO because you saw all those opportunities that exist for you to contribute, and so I think why does it work better with DAOs is a good question, right? And I think there are a number of elements, but one element definitely is, I think, what a DAO gives or can give, or wants to give to the community and to everyone being involved and getting more involved is ownership in the thing that you're building, right? In the product. And I think that was or is one key element that DAOs with their treasuries try to do, to involve people and actually incentivize them, through their governance token and making actually them part of the thing. And that, has, again, a number of dimensions. One definitely is like economical. You believe in the project, you believe in the governance token. It is similar to holding equity maybe of a company. And the other thing is also to directly participate and engage in the governance process. And yeah, that works better on some, let's say, blockchains or layers than on others, just because of the cost that it has for participating in voting and stuff. But I just think it's always an interesting exercise to think about why certain things work better with these decentralized organizations than like just regular entities.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add to that, I think this idea of inclusiveness and making people more contributing to the organization is one of the basic and most important ideas of a DAO, to really make it community owned and have everybody working on it. The one thing you should always be aware of, especially when you're designing your governance mechanism, is that how closely will people stay involved and how can that influence the workings of my DAO in the long run? Because especially with new projects, people tend to be very enthusiastic and contributing, and also with regards to governance and participating in decisions. But you should always be aware that there's the risk of decline in participation of individual users in the future. And if your governance mechanism is designed in the wrong way, then it could actually end up of a DAO being ungovernable, because you will never reach the quorum of decision making to go forward, etc. So that's an important element to think about in the design of the governance of your DAO in itself, because this inclusiveness is very cool and very powerful and very strong community building. But how do you keep the community involved and engaged throughout the life cycle of the DAO? That is, and that's something I think, quite frankly, we just don't know, because DAOs don't exist that long so far. So we don't have too much hand-on experience of how this behavior will expose itself over the long term.
I think that's a very good point, Oliver, because I think DAOs are very democratic organizations. And I mean, we also see that in modern democracies that we don't always have 100% of people who go vote for like federal elections or something. Sometimes it's just 50, 60%. And then again, let's say, for example, voting could be also associated with costs like reading the proposal, spending some thoughts on it, sometimes even like some transaction fees. So certainly, to the whole round, is there something where you think, how could I make incentives, or like how could I make it better or easier or less costly for people to engage in DAOs? Because I think this is really some point. Yeah.
that's actually the core of my PhD research. So what works best, and that's the problem with with governance. There isn't an easy answer because it depends on so many factors. So what is the goal of the DAO? What is the community of the DAO like? And what is the stage of the life cycle of the DAO? And for all these elements, you have to consider what is the best governance mechanism around at the moment. And the funny thing is, and I'm right now working on a new publication with regards to governance elements being incentives, decision modeling, and accountability towards the long-term viability of DAOs. So how long do they stay active? And well, just giving you a little sneak peek, based on the data, it doesn't look like there is, for example, much difference in the incentive structure and the long-term viability of a DAO. So if people get paid or don't get paid, and we're working on the final DAO, but we don't see too much differences actually in survivability rate of if a DAO stays active, yes or no. So again, we're working on the last data there, but that was quite interesting to see that basically from the data, because my hypothesis would be that, yeah, if people have a clear incentive to participate, and a clear incentive being, for example, financial incentive, then it's more viable that people will stay involved. But it doesn't seem to be like that precisely. And what could very well be is that also might have to do with the goal of this particular DAO, that this community doesn't care about finance whatsoever. They do it for the good of the community, and thus they stay involved. That could very well be, but this is up for future research.
Mm-hmm. Just definitely curious to read that PhD thesis when it's out.
To be honest, me too. I think like certainly I will like request that from you, Oliver, because this also seems to be like really like new man's land, you know, where basically nobody has really like dig like deep in, right? And then there's really something where it's like a gap in research, I would say.
Yeah, and actually, like I said, I've been monitoring all DAOs in the world for over 3 years now, and I have a list of them with the number of decentralization and the governance structure and how active they are in proposals and these kind of things. So and that list it keeps on adding every day. Like 2-3 new DAOs are added on it every single day. So,
Michael, I think you also wanted to add something.
Yeah, I wanted also to bring into perspective. I mean, with DAOs, it's not that it's better than another organization. I think it opens up new options, and we have already seen collaboration globally in the open source movement. So we have there some first experiences. But I think what DAOs add and what wasn't possible. So, for example, for public goods, open source, to ingrain a business model, incentives. And that's actually because DAOs allow the capital coordination, so the treasury that Niels said, and the enforcing of decisions on a global scale without being dependent on a corporate structure or government. And so I think, as Niels said, this bunch of people, this collective, had now a new way to create stuff. And I think that's really the interesting part. And what I wanted to emphasize, yes, the new part is the coordination of this treasury. That's now possible without somebody to trust, without an intermediary, and the enforcing of decision. And I think that's the heart of DAOs. If there's a flat hierarchy or not, if you're on Discord or not, actually, that you can do that, as Niels said, as fourth company. So I think that's not so the differentiator. And for me, this is really the innovation behind it, and why we need blockchain. And I think there it's really uncharted territory, how you organize that and how it will evolve.
I completely agree with you on that one, Michael, especially with the execution of decision making. And that is, and now I'm being a bit of a devil's advocate, a lot of the DAO projects out there, to my point of view, actually aren't DAOs because, for example, they use snapshots for voting. But once the voting is done, the vote is not automatically executed because still in the background, somebody needs to push a button or sign a multisig or whatsoever. So you have a bottleneck in decision to execution. that can be highly centralized. And Hovo said, well, you have a multi-sig to keep it decentralized. Well, that's a good thing, but still the decision is not automatically executed in this way. Somebody still has to push a button, or a couple of people still have to acknowledge the transaction on a multi-sig in itself. And in a lot of cases, there's not even a multi-sig behind it. So there's a single person behind it again who can actually decide for themselves if they are going to go with the decision yes or no. And I think if you really want to go through to being a decentralized autonomous organization, the decision should be executed automatically as well in these cases. And with regards to the word decentralized, that is very interesting, because if you keep it in the hands of two people, you can see it as decentralized also. So the number is always really hard. What we did find, based on our empirical research, is that interesting enough, DAOs that have more than 20 different token holders tend to live longer than DAOs with less than 20 token holders. So that's what we found in the data in itself.
I would argue, though, that not all, you mentioned, decisions have to be executed on chain, right? And so there are thousands of decisions taken every day in the life of a DAO, right? Because people are working together, and there are so many decisions like that have to be taken and are not executed on chain. So it's not about executing all decisions on chain in a DAO. It's about executing, and in my opinion, the crucial decisions that should be executed in a decentralized manner are those around the treasury. Again, I mean, that's the one thing that defines the DAO to a certain extent, the one resource that the community has to its availability, or the promise that it can control that resource. And I think and there are certain other things that also should have a certain process around it, how they're controlled. So I just want to add that if a DAO tries to bring everything on chain and execute everything on chain in this manner, I don't think that would be a healthy exercise even. I think it's totally okay for a DAO to have certain decisions that are taken by individuals. We work together, we develop a product. I'm maybe the senior developer of that smart contract, so I decide now that design element here. So there are just naturally certain things that are decided upon by individuals, and certain things can be decided upon by a multi-sig. And certainly certain things should only be decided upon by a governance vote that's executed on chain.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Niles. I agree with you. You can't execute all the decisions automatically on chain. It doesn't make sense. And the most the most useful example for, like you said, is the treasury should be executed automatically. So I would actually like to coin a term here. It just came up to me right now, is that we in DAOs should always strive to a minimum viable autonomously or autonomization in this sense. So make the elements that can be executed autonomously, make sure that they are, for example, treasury, etc. But not everything is viable to be executed autonomously. So strive for MVA, minimum viable autonomization, something like that.
It's a new term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because because we also had some bad news, right? I mean, in the past 2-3 months, because there was this incident of Wonderland DAO, which called itself a DAO, and I at some point have to say this gave a really bad impression also for DeFi, because at some point they figured out that the treasury was over their market cap price. So basically they were trading below backing, and then they were having a discussion whether they should dissolve the treasury and they return it to the token holders. And for this vote at the beginning, the majority was for dissolving the treasury. And then later on, the vote changed after, I would say, many small token holders actually organized and were saying no, we want to continue this project. And then once the vote had shifted in favor for keeping the treasury, the founder, Danny, just made a tweet and said like, well, I see like this vote is really split between two sides, which means for me that basically we cannot continue this project. And this was really something, this was a blow to me, because I was really thinking like, this cannot be the truth, right? Like that this is happening right now, because there is this vote, and at the end it's really one person taking a look at the vote and then basically like making a decision.
Yeah, and that risk is very, very evident in snapshot-based DAOs, because you just don't know what's behind it there. But even in on-chain governance DAOs, so DAOs like based on the Aragon platform or DAO House or whatsoever, well, DAO House is less likely than that, because that is a relative majority system. But still, if you really dive into the governance token holder balances that you see there, you see an awful lot of even these on-chain DAOs that turn out to be what I call dictatorships or semi-dictatorships, where there is actually one token holder holding the majority vote, or and if this and it's a dictatorship that if they don't vote, then the vote doesn't go through anyhow. And the semi-dictatorship is that if the token holders can vote, then and this one token holder doesn't vote, then they can get a voting through. But if this one token holder starts to vote on a certain proposal, then it will always go to the way of this particular token holder. And that's what we see actually quite a lot. So and all the Aragon DAOs and the DAO Haas DAOs or the Moloch based DAOs or the Garden DAOs whatsoever, this is the nice thing about blockchain-based DAOs. They're all transparent. So really go to their pages, dive into it, and look at the the token balances and how many percent does a certain token holder have, and is it a through decentralized something, or is somebody in the background being able to call the shots by themselves? So that's a tip that if you start working with a DAO, you should always dive into.
As you have looked at so many DAOs, Oliver, what are the two role models that you would point out that you've seen out there?
Depends on what you want. There are some nice initiatives going on right now. I do like, for example, the Garden DAO. They work with a voting system where it's not so much the initial balance of tokens that decide of if a voting goes through, yes or no, but also the amount of time that you support a certain voting. So it's basically a percentage time combination. So that, for example, could diminish the risk that last second somebody flies and says, hey, I don't agree to this at all, and they have bought some votes somewhere, etc. Is there a role model?
And maybe the ones, you know,
all the different systems have their ups and downs, or their pros and cons.
I was less pointing at the system, but kind of really the ones that have a big treasury. Let's take the top 21, just kind of how they're implemented, how they're decentralized, how they are governing. I was just wondering, you know, if you say look at one or two that I think come closest to how I envision DAOs, look at these two and real example that have kind of millions or billions in treasury which they manage.
Yeah, I like well, for example, the people behind OneHive. They have been working in the space for a long time, so that's quite interesting to work on it. And I don't have other names really on top of mind right now, but I can look into my Excel while you guys keep on talking, and I'll come up with a couple of names in a minute. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think Yearn is an interesting example in terms of their community and the way they actually work as a team, also pretty much decentralized and living those principles, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Up to the compensation tooling, right? I mean, you know, Yearn, they have developed Coordinate, right, which is a compensation tool for DAOs, so for essentially allowing a decentral process to determine compensation for individual contributors to a DAO, right? I think like compensation is one of the areas that's a challenge for DAOs, I think, because you want to contribute obviously based on what you want to compensate based on what you contribute and stuff. So that's not trivial, right? And so I think that's an interesting example.
Yeah, can I just touch on one thing, because Oliver before also mentioned Aragon, and I mean, you guys are already like very long in the DeFi space, in the blockchain space, so you basically already know what functionalities DAOs can have right now, but certainly there's also, let's say, services for DAOs. I mean, Aragon or Kleros, which is like a decentralized dispute platform. So let's say, for example, we have two parties, they have a dispute. There's no regulation, right? Because DAOs are not like registered entities somewhere, so we cannot really say, hey, this is like, let's say, Swiss or German. So like in that regard, do you think that there will be more kind of, let's say, protocols or services that will basically enable like the full potential of DAOs? And this is basically just like a process where we have to wait until basically people come up with solutions on basically how we can govern us even better?
So you're saying services, right? For DAOs, yeah. And one concept that I've been, thinking about, or that's also caused some challenges on our side is, you may be a DAO, you may be decentralized, you may not have a legal entity, but you consume services from legal entities, right? That will, probably remain like that. And I'm thinking simple things like maybe compute services from Google Cloud or whatever. And so you have those relationships to those companies, and oftentimes these companies actually require a legal counterpart to do business with, right? So that means essentially that the DAO itself, as in the organization, cannot do business with these service providers. You can always, the individuals behind the DAO can do business with them, right? So you can subscribe as an individual, but you cannot subscribe as a business, right? And so the concept of some sort of a services company that excuse me, that actually takes over, that steps in and actually handles this relationship with the services provider, and then also takes the other side and actually works with the DAO. That's something that people actually are doing just by setting up their own legal entity that can handle that. But I could see that's a service that could evolve in this industry. So dedicated companies that actually do that.
Mm-hmm. Actually, one question now also for Hovo, because I wanted to touch on that before, and then we a little bit like change the topic. At Exodia, Hovo, you have basically created some, like, let's say, course on like basically to learn everything about Ohm and basically the math behind Ohm. And I always very much appreciated that, because it means that not only like people, for example, like are investors, but actually they also learn something in the DAO, and basically it's also about education and knowledge transfer. Would you also maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the idea is that, if you want to make people take the decisions, they have to know what they're talking about, or, they have to have knowledge on what is the good decision to make, or, the best. So in that kind of keeping that in mind, we created and we built like some quizzes, and we created some materials for them to kind of learn the basic concepts, and why we are taking the decisions, and when we go to them to ask them their opinion, they are not like throwing like any ideas that's just because there are big numbers or whatever. It was to make them, to teach them how to take, well, what decision is the best. And of course, it's like not black and white. There isn't like this decision is better than the other. It's often more like a shade of gray. But for us to give the tools to users to be able to govern the protocol by itself without us telling them, well, this is the good solution, this is the best option. For us, it's a goal, and it's how you kind of decentralize the process also, in my opinion. Because right now there's like our core group that is really familiar and understand how the protocol works. But if we keep relying on us, then we're not really decentralizing the process. So the goal is really to give the tools and the knowledge to everyone to be able to really govern and eventually decentralize every process decision for the monetary policy of Exodia.
Mm-hmm. And just like as a comparison, I always see this a little bit like doing an internship or like having a traineeship at like a company, right? So now I'm back. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I think, yeah, but you still need to kind of put some work into it, just like just like you said, just like an intern. So, and we are there and happy to help the community build the knowledge. And we're giving that kind of knowledge about the protocol policies and all that stuff. But there is a lot of other people that think this is great, and they kind of bring their own knowledge about other aspects of the DAO. And so we're kind of building that community knowledge and really having like a lot of members to contribute it with their specific knowledge. And so we're really building that knowledge, and not just about policies, but also about other stuff. So this is really great.
Michael, I looked into my list of a couple of interesting ones. Well, I mentioned OneHive. An Aragon-based one that's quite interesting is Bright ID. And another one that is quite interesting, that is, for example, Moloch-based or DAO house-based, is the Metacartel Ventures. These are DAOs that carry quite some treasury, have quite some members, and are quite active in voting, etc. And yeah, all their governance systems have their pros and their cons. So it completely depends on what the goal is of your DAO if you want to do it like this. And I would say, yeah, start experimenting with it. What works best for you in this case to support the goal that you want to achieve.
I will certainly come back to you, Oliver, because like I also want to take now a look at all the different DAOs and join them. Like at least like take a look at it, because
be aware of a very, very deep rabbit hole.
Okay, yeah, I'm used to that in crypto and DeFi. Like usually you always fall in, but you never get out. Okay, since we have only like I would say like 5 to 10 minutes left, we got like a lot of questions on YouTube. I would just try to read some or most of them in case anybody of you has got an answer. I would be happy to hear it. Otherwise, like we would just skip it if it's maybe a little bit too sophisticated, because some were very precise. Olivia Höving is asking, I would love to hear about the legal setup of DAOs in Europe. What available frameworks can DAOs use?
Well, it's I don't know if there are any specific legal frameworks in the Netherlands or in Europe. I do know that Delaware, etc., they do have some legal framework setups for DAOs specifically. But I would say in a lot of cases, it completely depends on how you set up your DAO, and then the legal structure will follow out of it. Because if you set up a DAO with a governance structure where every member has one vote, it is what we call in Dutch een vereniging, probably in German een Vereinigung, and that is the legal structure behind it. What looks like how the most of the DAOs are organized are like a Vereinigung or a vereniging, or like a corporation, a mutual, and that is what we see basically a lot. And to this regard, I think it's very important, and I think Niles stressed on it as well, do really think about your legal structure, because right now, if you didn't think of your legal structure and you are setting up a project with a lot of treasury and payouts and buying stuff, etc., and you didn't set up a legal structure at all, it looks like that the legislation is going this way. Although I'm not a lawyer, I'm an engineer, but I do work a lot closely with lawyers, is that if you haven't set up a legal structure, it could very well be that all the governance token holders could be liable for decisions of a DAO in itself, because they mutually made the decision for things in itself. So really think this through, because otherwise it could backfire.
Just a quick addition. So I think also association or Verein is a legal entity form that's very close. So for example, in Switzerland, there's a project called Hopper. They used an association and linked it to a token. So if you're interested, have a look how they did it. I think that's an innovative approach with the current legal system.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Oliver. Then I have a question for Niels. The question is, how much money is pooled, and the money that is being pooled, are they securities or just gifts? And the question, I think, aims at that DAOs are afraid of licensing securities. It's a very specific question. Is there any these of concerns that maybe DAO could issue some form of securities, and this could later on cause trouble for the DAO?
If this is referring to some sort of a public sale of governance tokens, then I can not really help, because we explicitly decided against selling governance tokens publicly, because we didn't want to run into legal issues. I have no legal understanding of that issue. We decided against a public sale for the unclarity that exists around that.
And then
actually, if you want to be more specific, so we actually gifted the tokens. We gifted the tokens to whoever wanted of these tokens.
Because the same person also asked the question, how do you return value back to the community, to the owners, without it being considered a return on investment? Because I think this would be...
that is it has many facets, this discussion, right? There are definitely protocol elements in the protocol designed to return value to governance token holders. I think at the moment, the sentiment shifts a little bit away from pure tokenomics, where previously people just invested based on, okay, will that token appreciate in value because of some mechanism, versus now people thinking more about what is more some native return on investment that I could get based on how the protocol is designed. So I think one has to carefully look at the protocol itself, and does it take fees? Where are these fees distributed to, and so on.
Thank you, Niels. And then the last two questions. Pradeep asks, can we create an intra-DAO within a large company for processes which require unbiased decision-making using voting mechanisms? That's a very, very precise and detailed questions. If anybody has maybe a thought on that.
Sure you can, but if it's within a company, why would you need a DAO to begin with, or a blockchain-based system to begin with? Because hopefully you can trust the employees within your company and set up a centralized voting structure in itself.
I agree. I actually agree, yeah. And then Miguel is asking, what do you think, and I think that's a very nice question also to end today's webinar, what do you think will be the best use cases for the future of DAOs? And then the remark, please think 15 to 20 years ahead. I think this is a little bit far-fetched, but maybe, I guess 5 years to 10 years might be a really good time frame already. Is there any thoughts?
Maybe to put it in perspective, I would look at it from that part, from the evolution of organization. DAOs are a step in the evolution of organizations. And you started as a blacksmith, you had your own shop. Then kind of in the next evolution, you had shares. So you had to gather this company. Then railroads came, and I think JP Morgan invented the limited liability company, and that opened up always new use cases. And I think DAOs are then really this globally first native digital organization. So it's difficult to point to a direction which use case. So it's going to be like a corporation enabling a lot of use cases. It's rather how it enables that. So I think it opens up really, this global digital workforce that is out there can now much easily, much faster create products and innovate products. And I think it's not that much on the use case itself, but how these products are shipped and how communities can contribute and are part of it. And I think that's for me the innovation we will see in 15 and 20 years. And I'm convinced about that.
Just one sentence to add, maybe before we close. I think we'll just naturally, get to this point because people increasingly start to work and live in the internet, and these types of organizations, they're built for the internet, right? So I think we'll just naturally get to the point where more and more projects or organizations work under these type of structure. And then which are those projects where that fits well? I think, again, I'm coming back again to what the very purpose is. What you're trying to do here is to build resilient systems, right? So everything where resiliency is critical, I think, is a natural candidate for that.
Thank you, Niels.
I think like the freedom that a DAO gives to users who wants to contribute to a DAO, but also to communities who wants to start a DAO or work on a project or work on something, really will kind of push that forward, because it's really like your freedom and like liberty for the users to do kind of whatever they want, and without having any legal problem. So I think that we're gonna see a lot of new innovation and new things coming for DAOs. Yeah.
Thank you, Ovo. Okay, great. Oliver, did you just want to say something, or? Okay, perfect. No, then I want to thank all our guests today, our speakers here, because I have to say this was like a very exciting the conversation we had here. Certainly, I will also request some more information from your side, Oliver, from your PhD. I think you're all quite interested in something as new as that. And I will certainly also follow up the developments of Liquidity, Fiat DAO, and Exodia. So I think there's also a lot to come in the future. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I want to say thank you to the speakers, and I hope you enjoyed it. And then I would say have a nice day today and a nice rest week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
You're welcome.